right, it looks like I should be live now. I just counted it out. It looks like there's about a 17-second delay on this stream. So if you chat me something and I don't respond right away, that is why. I'll put in here also, welcome to episode. Let's get started. All right, so welcome. This is the third episode. Oh, goodness. Hold on a second. My iPad's volume was up, and when the stream kicked in, it started playing an ad. So anyway, this is episode 3 of who knows how many episodes. This will be an ongoing series migrating my website, which is jeffgeerling.com, from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8. The first episode, we set up the code base. We set up the site locally, and it ended up looking like this. The second episode, we set up the migrate modules, tried to get connected to the database, my old database, and ended up at that point having the database not being able to be connected to. So in this episode, we're going to try to connect to that old database, the Drupal 7 database that's running locally, and see what we can do getting Drush to kick off the migration and set up the migration configuration for us. So I set up this issue last week, figure out why the connection was not working, and I actually cheated a tiny bit. I spent a few minutes looking into what the problem was, and what happened was we ran the Drush command for the migration. So I'm going to open up a new terminal window, and I will say docker ps to see what's running, jeffgeerling.com. So I'm going to log into this container, the jeffgeerling-com container. So I'm going to say docker exec-it bash. So that gets me into the Docker container, and now I can run Drush commands. Vendor bin Drush status. Just check and see if Drush is working okay. And I might be switching development environments depending on how today goes. We might spend a little time switching over to DDev or something like that to see if we can get a little more speed. My poor laptop is practically dying doing this live stream. The CPU is already at like 90% and continuously while I'm streaming, and then throw in Drush and MySQL and things like that, and it just is not a very happy scenario. The stream might drop out a couple times, so we'll see what happens. But anyway, so Drush is working, and I tried running this migrate-upgrade command. Sorry about my throat. It seems like I might have a little bit of dryness. Whoops. Let's go back here. So I tried running this command, and it gave me an error trying to connect to the database. So this is the connection string for the old legacy Drupal 7 database, and it gets that connection string from here. So when you say legacy DB key for the migrate upgrade command, that is this key, this array key right here. Let me get a drink of water. I'm also going to ask if anybody on chat can just say if you're seeing this okay. Make sure that it's not too small or anything. Actually, the code might actually be under the window. Let me check how that looks. Yeah, let me bring this code over. Whoops. Let me bring the code over so you can actually see it. So the problem was it's trying to connect to localhost, and the way I have this set up, I'll make a new window. Docker ps. There are two containers running the new site. There's jeffgeerling.com is the Drupal Apache and PHP container, and then there's a MySQL container running the database. The old site is running on a separate Docker container, and so if we try connecting to localhost, that doesn't work. Even though if I open up SQL Pro on my Mac, that's the application I usually use to connect to databases. To MySQL and MariaDB databases. If I connect here, I can connect to localhost or 127.0.0.1, and that's on port 3306, yeah. So I can connect to it here, so that's the old database, and I can also connect to the new data, or the old database, sorry. I can also connect to the old database on port 3307. That's all from my local host. The problem is if you're inside this Docker container, if I try running mysql-u Drupal -p Drupal is the password, -h Drupal, or -h would be 127.0.0.1, and database is Drupal. If I try doing that, it's going to say can't connect, because inside the Docker container, 127.0.0.1 is that Docker container, and it's not seeing my host machine. So I also tried doing things like putting in the, what is it, Docker PS. I tried putting in this Drupal 7 name for the container, Drupal 7, that didn't work. I tried putting in my host IP address, all kinds of different things. None of that worked. So I found out after a little bit of digging that there's a special DNS name that looks up the host machine. And so you can bounce through that to other containers running on localhost through a port. So I tried this, and this actually works because it goes through that special connection. And let me make sure that working well. Good. So this kind of bounces through localhost, through Docker for Mac localhost, a special DNS thing. This only works on Docker for Mac. For Docker for Windows, there might be a different one. And for Linux, I think that it works a little more easily in general, so you don't have to have a special bounce through localhost thing. So if I do this actually works, and I'm connected. Show tables, and it shows me everything. So I can connect to the database. So that was the problem there. So now if I come over here and I put in that name for the host instead of localhost, this should work. So I'll save that file, and I'm going to go up to this command again, same command, and run it, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so now we're getting an error message. And this is another thing that happens sometimes when you're doing Drupal work with things that are still kind of, sort of in flight. The migration process is mostly done, but there's still a few little things, odds and ends, that are being cleaned up. Apparently the migration modules call Drushprint, which was deprecated in Drush 10. I know that because I searched what I did to figure this out was I just grabbed this call to undefined function Drushprint. I went over to my handy debugging tool called Google, and I searched that and migrate, and then I found this issue with the migrate-upgrade module. And in this issue, basically it says, yeah, there's a problem with that. I went over here, and it has a patch, I think, this module, or this issue does. The patches needs work. It looks like there's still some failing tests, but the idea is that this module needs to be upgraded to work with Drush 10. And I also, whenever I run into these issues, I always put a comment saying, like, here's how I found this, and here's some ideas for making this easier. Because what happened was I read through, and you can look back in the video from last week, I was reading through this documentation and said install Drush. And so you just run this and you install Drush. The problem is that gives you Drush 10, and Drush 10 gives you this error, and then you get stopped and blocked, and you can't do a migration, and that's really annoying. So in the issue, I commented, hey, this error message is annoying. Maybe we should recommend that you use Drush 9. And so, who was it here? Ressa, thank you, Ressa, put in a comment in this documentation that says, for now, use Drush 9. There's a patch in this issue, and there's two different ways we could approach getting over this problem. One way is we could take this patch and apply it to our project and work with that. The other way is to install Drush 9, and for now I'm just going to use Drush 9 to get past this, but in the future we might need a patch for something else anyways, and if we do, then I would show you what I do for patches. There's a utility called, I don't think it's added to the Drupal core Composer project template, but there's a project called, what is it? Composer patches that lets you apply patches and manage them using Composer. In the old days, what you would do is you'd like download a patch file and put it in a patches folder and apply it to your code base, and that'd be tracked that way, but it's very manual. And what would happen a lot of times, and I've seen this happen many times, is you would upgrade your site and you'd forget to reapply that patch, and you'd go to production and then things start failing because the patch that you rely on is gone. So this project makes it so that every time you run Composer install, it makes sure that patch is always applied. And if there's errors with the patch, like if you update to a new version of Drupal core and the patch breaks, you'll know that right away instead of going to production and seeing that it breaks. So in the future, we might do that. For now, just know that there's this cool Composer patches utility. And it's relatively easy to set up, and all you have to do once you have it running is add a line for each patch you do. So if I wanted this patch, I would copy the URL and I would put it into a Composer patches section in my composer.json file, and then run Composer install. But we're not going to do that. Instead, I am going to go back over here to my code base. I can close out of here. I'm going to go here and say composer require, what was the command? Drush 9.0. Let's do it, paste it in. Composer require drush 9.0. This is going to say, give me any version of 9, the latest version of 9, but not any version 10 or after. That's what these little things, this is kind of meaning like 9 and above up to 10. There's a bunch of these different modifiers, and the Composer's documentation goes through them all. There's like tilde, and there's the little caret, and there's, I don't remember what other ones there are, but each one of them means something different in terms of the version constraints. So this is going to update, well, it's going to downgrade Drush to 9, Drush 9 dot something, 9.7, I guess, instead of running Drush 10. And we'll see that change in composer.json. So you can see it already updated here when I ran this command. And soon it's going to update the composer.lock file to choose the right version of Drush and all the dependencies under it. So I'll let that go for a minute. And hopefully once that's done, this command, when you run it again, I just pressed up to get back to this command. Actually, I'll go clear. Hopefully this command will run and not fail once this is done. Oh, so now we're hitting this error again. What is the Composer? I keep hitting this with my Drupal projects now, and I probably should just set this globally. Composer memory limit. Forget what the thing is that we need to put here. Composer memory limit equals -1. So that's saying don't have a memory limit for Composer itself. And we'll try that again. Should probably quit mail. Anything that is not completely devoted to this live stream needs to be quit, otherwise this computer falls over. I guess now would be a good time to say, if you want to continue watching these videos, the best way to make sure that you're notified of them is right below where I am. On this, just below me, there's a subscribe button. If you hit that, and also the little notification thing, I don't usually use notifications because I don't like notifications. But if you want to be reminded of when there's a new one of these coming out, which is every Tuesday at this point, subscribe and hit that notification button. And then that way, when the stream starts, you should get a notification on your mobile device or email or something like that. Maybe you get a carrier pigeon. Like I said, I don't actually use the notifications, so I don't know how YouTube does it, but I know that all the other YouTubers I watch, they always are hyping up the subscribe button, so I figure I'm supposed to do that too. Should probably also be a little more crazy and wild, because that's what they do. And I'm supposed to cut all my things so you don't ever hear me breathing, because apparently that's how you talk if you're on YouTube. Anyway, looks like this finished. I'm going to say git diff and see what changed. So it says Drush, instead of 10.2, it's 9.0. And then, yeah, so Drush 9.7.2. And then all the rest of the dependencies in this file are there. So I'm going to add that. So it just has those changes, and then there's a little new section in the README that I started working on right here. Oops. So I'm going to say git commit -m downgraded Drush to 9.7.x because it was causing problems. Eric says Mac minus. That's an inside joke. But yeah, believe me, I've considered looking into using a PC with like 64 gigs of RAM and some sort of Threadripper processor for this stuff. The other nice thing is, so the software I'm using for the live stream is called OBS. It's an open source streaming program. And you can set tons of different options, and I have basically everything on minimum. That's how I've always played games too, mostly because I never had a computer fast enough to play them. Even though I have a PC, but it's a slower PC. It's not like a gaming rig. But if you get a PC running Windows with certain supported video cards, OBS will use them for the encoding, so your CPU is not doing all the extra work. Anyway, that's another topic for another day. But I committed this, and I'll push it up to my code repo. And I probably should have put in here an issue reference. Actually, let me do that really quick. I'll just show you. Because Git is something that over time, as you work with version control, especially if you're on a team more, it's good to know how to do some things. So git commit -amend lets me change my git commit message, and this dropped me into Vim. You can configure Git to use Nano or some other editor if you want, but I'm using Vim. So I'm going to hit I to go to insert mode and put in an issue reference. This is issue number 5. And then hit escape, and then :write and quit. And then now if I say git push, it's going to say it's rejected because I changed something in Git. And Git, you shouldn't change history. You shouldn't change commits that are already pushed up to a GitHub repo and things like that. But since this repository is private and I'm the only one that can see it, I will do a force push and, as they say, use the force. Git push -- force. You should almost never do a git push force in any circumstance. However, in this case, I know that the only change was I changed this commit message. And I'm the only one using the repository, so it's not going to cause problems for me. So anyway, I did that. And the nice thing with GitHub, and I think GitLab too, is if you mention an issue, it pops it into the issue, a link to that commit, so I can see right after that, oh, here's what I did to fix that. So just a little aside, once you get more aggressive with using Git and use GitHub or GitLab or some other utilities like that, it's nice. And Streamlabs, I'll have to check it out at some point. Josh says, somebody call Linus. All right, so we have Drush. Let's try this command again now that we have a version of Drush that supposedly works with the migrate-upgrade module. Let's see if the CPU can take it. No, that's annoying. So here's a new problem, and I wonder if it's just Drush's cache needs to be rebuilt. If you ever downgrade Drush or install new modules, things like that, sometimes you just need to do a cache rebuild. So I'm going to try that and see what happens. So far the computer hasn't died, so that's a good thing. Okay, so it did a cache rebuild. Let's try this command again. Clear out that history, and let's see if it blows up or if it actually works. Hey, it's doing something. Something's better than nothing, and it looks like there were no errors. If you're ever in a terminal and you want to see if there were errors, if there's a lot of output, you can, what is it? Do this $? That means that there were no errors. If it has an error, to give a 1 or the error code 1 or anything above 1 would be an error. Anyway, so there's no errors. And at this point, that was just the config I think I did. Configure only. So that should have exported the configuration. That means if I go to localhost, this site doesn't yet have any of the content. So if I go to administration and content, it didn't do any migration. So there's no content items yet. And there's like all the different settings and views and all that kind of stuff is still not on the site, but it did supposedly migrate this configuration. So let me look back to the upgrade using Drush. Setup, generate migrations. And if I try Drush migrate status, let's see what this says now after I did the migrate upgrade configuration only. Let's see what migrate status tells me. So it looks like now this is very good news. I'll make this a little bigger. Hopefully, let me see if it's, okay, it's not being hidden. Oh, where did I go? I think my camera. Hold on a second. So I just, that's not right. There we go. Okay, I'm back. That was interesting. I just realized I left my battery in my camera. And if you leave your battery in the camera and it's a mirrorless camera, the battery gets burned through in about 10 minutes. So I just put in the power supply and now it should keep working. Sorry about that. But anyway, this is good news. It looks like it's seeing all of the content. So it's seeing 2,657 files. It's seeing blog posts, 2,850. So it's seeing all these different things. There's some settings, some formats, menu items. I have a pretty simple menu. For a lot of sites that are much larger, you'd see tons more menu items and things like that. There's 24 project nodes, 2 page nodes. I guess I'd have like the about page as a page. So it looks like it got everything here. So I'm going to look at what to do next. It looks like the next thing would be to do an actual migration and see if that works. Migrate, import all. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And while it's doing that, I'm going to also show you something that is important to do for making sure that I can do this again over and over again, and I can start testing it. Because as we start getting into this, now that we're actually doing work on the site that's making changes, I want to make sure that I can redo this stuff over and over again. So now it's doing all these migrations. Probably once it gets to file or node, it's going to take a long time. Let's see, block content entity type does not exist. I'll get back to the repeatability in a minute. Let's take a look at this. This is interesting because I think that this is saying basically like there's some of the blocks on my old site want to be migrated to blocks on the new site, but there's no block content type in Drupal 8 by default, and that's causing an issue. It's interesting though, because you'd think that would be something that it would see like, oh, I need to create a block content entity type because it didn't exist in Drupal 7. So let's look at what we see if we Google that. And it looks like there's a couple issues for it already. So I'm going to look in here. Works as designed. If I do this, I get that error message. You don't have the block content module enabled. Oh, this is interesting. So what is... Oh, so it's trying to do these things. That's funny because D6 upload field. The site did originally come from Drupal 6, so I wonder if there's some old junk sitting around in there or if I just need to do this. Let's see. Let me get back to here too. All right, so I should probably just do the group migrate Drupal 7. And I'm also going to start documenting this because I'm going to start getting confused as to what I'm doing. When you are ready to migrate content from the Drupal 7 site database, run, what is it? Migrate Drush import, or Drush migrate import. Oops, and he's saying group, -- group, migrate Drupal 7 is this group of content. So do that, and also I need to enable this module, it looks like. So I need to enable the block content module so that it can migrate blocks from Drupal 7 into Drupal 8. And also, since I fixed this issue, I'm going to go ahead and close it. Fixed via the above commit using Drush 9.7.x, and also updating the settings.php file to use the Docker for Mac localhost DNS shortcut. All right, so I'm going to close out that issue. And go back over here. So I need to enable this block content module, so I'm going to go to extend. I could do it with Drush, I guess, but I'll just do it in the interface. Actually, I probably should do it with Drush because this page will take like 10 seconds to load. Actually, it didn't take too long. All right, block content. Is there a block content module? Block. There's a block module. Yeah. There's a custom block module. Is this the block content module? Oh. Well, here's a fun thing. In Drupal, I don't remember when, at some point with the custom labels for blocks, like the block name is, or the module name is block content, and the username is custom block. If I didn't know that the machine names of modules are hidden away like this, then I would have never been able to figure that out just looking around. So that's kind of one of those little Drupal, a mini Drupal WTF. The module name and what maintainers refer to things as are often different. So in here it says, you know, this seems to indicate you don't have this module enabled. So I'm like, okay, I'll enable that module. And I'm like, where's the block content module? I don't see it. Anyway, another small aside. So I'm going to enable that module, install that module, I should say. In Drupal 8, it's install or uninstall. There's no enabling and disabling. In Drupal 7 and below, you could disable a module and keep its settings around. In Drupal 8, there's no disabling. You basically remove the module or install the module, and that's it. I'm also going to put a note in here. I'll do this in a block quote. Upgrade using Drush guide in the docs. And just a note that the block content module's name is custom block in the UI. All right. So again, anytime that I see a little issue like I just had, I like to put a comment, if I have anything more to contribute to the discussion, put a comment into the issue queue. That way, not only do other people who have the same issue get a little bit more information that might help them, inevitably the next time I do one of these migrations, I'm going to have the exact same issue, unless it's fixed, but I'm guessing it won't be by that time. And so I'll see, oh, I did this before, and that triggers a little memory that, oh, I know how to fix this. That's easy. And of course, my computer's like, let's see, is this, okay, so block content should be, or what is it called? Yeah, block content should now be enabled. And I'm going to go ahead and run, I'll run this command, not all, and we'll see what happens next. All right, so I left that comment. And another thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a new issue, export site configuration into code repository. And then I have instructions for doing this on, what is that? The Drupal for Kubernetes. So it looks like migrations are running. let that run in the background. Hopefully there won't be another error. There is another error. Oh, that's annoying. It's busy with another operation. Okay, so put this on pause for a second. It says that it's busy with another operation importing. So this happens sometimes if you run a migration and it like stops midway through and breaks, or there's an error like we just had earlier, and then it gets stuck in importing status. So if I say migrate status, Drush migrate status, in here it should say that it's whatever that migration is, upgrade D7 block. It'll say that the status of it is importing. And you can, since we know that it errored out and didn't complete, I can go in here and basically tell it to reset itself back to idle. And I forget what, I think it's like migrate reset. If you just run Drush, that'll give you all the commands available. So I'm going to run Drush. It'll sit there killing my CPU for a few minutes. And if I go to migrate, migrate, reset status. Okay, so there's a command, because this happens sometimes if it fails in the middle of a migration. You can reset the status manually back to idle. So I'm going to say migrate, what was it? Migrate reset status, MRS. These are the shortcuts for all these things. So migrate rollback is MR, migrate status is MS, and reset status is MRS. So I'm going to do Drush MRS, and what was that migration? It was upgrade D7 block. I think you just paste it like that. Let's see. And again, that's Drush, migrate, reset status, upgrade D7 block, and it just reset it to idle. So now if I go back and run this migration, we'll let it go, and it should hopefully pick that back up and keep going. And hopefully we don't get another error message. So I'm going to go back over here for this exporting the site configuration. I want to do this so that every time I reinstall the site, I get all the configuration, including all the migration configuration, from the code base, so that I can track it using Git. So if I make changes to migrations, it's tracked in my repository. So I started the new project, configure the site, and make it reproducible is the document in here that I am looking at. So I added, there's a few errors here. We'll look at those in a second. Let's get to here so that we can actually start tracking the configuration. We're going to use Drupal's built-in configuration management system. It's nice to have the admin toolbar module. We'll enable that later at some point. Go to here, add those modules. We already installed some other modules. Now I'm going to export the configuration here using Drush config export. And this is basically exporting all of Drupal's configuration into one folder. And we'll see that should be in a folder config in here, I think. Let's see what happens if I just run Drush config export. And it should go into config/sync by default. That's not the folder I want. I think it exported into here. Yeah, this is not, no, I don't want it in my files folder. I'm going to delete this folder that it just created. So apparently the default is to write it into site's default files, which is a public folder. I don't like that idea, even though I'm guessing that this file says like don't allow reading from those files or something, but I don't like that. I don't like having anything in my public files folder that has to do with the site's configuration or even this PHP stuff. I don't really like it in there, but with Drupal, that's the way it is. Just because that's a public folder on your web server that people can read from. So I need to override that. Config sync directory Drupal 8 settings.php. I know there's a setting to say where do you want that directory, and apparently the default is not there anymore. So I noticed this issue. This is my own project, but I noticed an issue with it. I noticed that on this page, my documentation is wrong. So I'm going to open up a new issue and say Drupal's default config sync directory is in public files. Docs are wrong. So that from this page. Instead, you need to override the sync directory in your settings.php file. And changing the storage location. So this is where it tells you what to do. And we want it to be in a different directory. Config sync directory, here we are. And this is where we want it, I'm pretty sure. Okay. See for more details. So save that. Related. All right, I'm going to create this issue just so I don't forget to create it. And so what we want to do is update this to write it into a config sync folder that's in here. So it's outside of the web root, because I don't need the configuration for the running website. I need the configuration when I deploy the website or when I update the website or when I'm developing. So I don't need that to be end user accessible. Oh, and somebody's posting in there whose name I cannot read. The config directory sync path. So yeah, so I'm going to go settings.php and go down to the bottom. Oh, it looks like it wrote this directory when it installed Drupal. So I can just say, it's interesting, settings config sync directory. So in here it has this, and then someone in chat posted config directory sync, and then in my settings.php it's settings config sync directory. Like which one of these settings is it actually? I'm gonna override this just to see if that works, and copy this out and paste it there. So let's see if that works. If I say drush config export, if that exports into the config folder. It looks like it might have worked. Yeah, there's the config folder. Look at that. How wonderful. So now what this did was every setting in Drupal that is able to be changed in the interface or via Drush or anything, it's all in these YAML files. So all these migrations that we just generated when I use that config update command, all those are in here. So if I go to, let's see, upgrade D7 file, these are all the settings for the file migration. So it has the source base path that we entered on the command line. It's public files, and it knows, the mapping of where it was in Drupal 7 and where it will be in Drupal 8. So this is good. So now we have all the config here. And what this does is it's kind of cool. If I say drush migrate status, and you can see it has all the configuration that we have. What I'm going to do next is, let's see, existing config. What I can do next is install the configuration from this folder, so that I don't have to, if I'm reinstalling Drupal, I don't have to rerun the commands to generate the migrations and then rerun the migrations and all that kind of stuff every time that I do it. So I'm going to go existing config here in this install command, and I'm going to go ahead and, you might think it's crazy if you've never done this before, but I'm going to go out of this Docker container. I'm going to say docker compose -v. That deletes the containers, deletes the MySQL database, deletes everything in there. I'm going to delete it all. And I'm going to reinstall Drupal, and using this existing config flag tells Drush that when it's installing, also import all the configuration from this directory. So all the work we've done so far on the site up to this point will be re-imported on that installation. So Niraj, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name, it says it changed in a recent version of Drupal 8. So it looks like this, let's see. And this is let's see. So here, in Drupal 8.8, it's defined in settings. So I just didn't read far enough. I was reading up to here, and then I stopped reading. But down here it says this changed. So at some point when everybody's on Drupal 8.8 and later, this part up here should probably be updated. But anyway, that's good to know. All right, so I deleted everything. If I go back to my site, which, did I have it open somewhere? Yeah. So if I go back here and hit go, it's not there. It doesn't exist anymore. So I'm going to make a new instance of it. It'll be very fresh and empty and void of all life forms of Drupal kind. And if I go to localhost, right now Drupal's not installed, so it's going to give me an error message, which is good. The error right now is because MySQL is booting up. I'm going to say docker compose logs-f. This lets me follow along the logs of the containers that are starting. And so you can see the MySQL container still doing a bunch of things. The first time you start the MySQL container, it has to set up the databases and all that. So it's still doing all that. And until that's done, Drupal's going to give you error messages like this. So we're just going to wait for that to finish setting up MySQL. Almost. We're getting there. So close. Oh, it looks like it's running now. So if I go here, it's probably going to take me to the installer or some other error message page, because Drupal is not installed right now. Yeah, and it looks like it's taken me over to the installer. So I'm going to run this command. Is this the right command? It's the Drupal. Okay. So let me get out of here. Docker compose exec Drupal. So this is going to run Drush site install minimal with the existing config. So let's see if that works. My computer is dying right now, but the stream looks like it's still working, so that's good. All right, so I'm going to get out of the installer and just wait here. So now Drush is doing its installation, and I'm going to take a drink of water. Oh, and stretch a little bit. It's 10:42, so hopefully we'll be able to see the fruits of the migration, or at least get back to that error message that we saw a minute ago. But the nice thing here is, like, now that I have the configuration for the site, and now that I have a command, a Drush command to run to reinstall the site with that configuration, any changes we make to the site can be redone easily. So this is annoying. We have error messages. Why is it trying to install Bartik system main and Bartik user login? Depends on the Bartik theme that will not be installed. Why? Oh, these are probably blocks. So this is one fun thing. Sometimes blocks that were in use a long time ago from a Drupal 7 site or even a Drupal 6 site are still in the system, and they depend on themes that might not be in your Drupal 8 site or might not be enabled. So what I think I'm going to try to do, I'm going to see, so let's see, Bartik system main. I'm going to do two things. When you have to be careful manually modifying Drupal's configuration files that it dumps. Usually it's not a great idea, but if you know what you're doing, you can do it, and it usually doesn't blow things up. Sometimes it does. So I'm going to look for this UUID to see if it's used anywhere, and it looks like it's still searching. If it's used somewhere else, then I can modify that file to remove it, so it's not used anywhere else. I'm also going to look up if this ID appears anywhere else, and it looks like it does in a test, in a migrate block test, so that's okay, because the test doesn't run unless you run the test, and that would set up its own thing. So I'm going to delete this Bartik system main, because we don't need that. I don't even use the Bartik theme on my Drupal 7 site, so I know that I don't need it. And I'm going to look for this one. No matches found. And look for that one. There's a test. Okay, so those are just in tests. So I can delete these two. I don't need them. Let me try running this again. And these blocks that it's finding, these were probably from the actual migration I ran. So I probably shouldn't have done an actual migration until after I committed the first working set of configuration. So I kind of, what do you call it? I tied a hand behind my back here by doing that. And now I have to work through these block issues. I might have to delete all these blocks that were exported because I don't want them to mess up the configuration. So I'll wait for this, and it'll probably error out on another one of these blocks. And if it does, I'm just going to delete all the blocks. Let me make sure none of the other ones are used anywhere while it's doing that. Nope. Nope. Okay. So if it errors on that, on the blocks again, then I'll just remove the rest. I wonder if I think I'm using, am I using the Stark theme? Let me see. jeffgeerling.com. I thought I had a custom theme. Yeah. This theme is based on Boron, which is a very old, not maintained theme, but it was HTML5 back when HTML5 was a new thing. Back in like 2012, 2014, 2010. I don't remember when that was. But apparently an early version of my theme might have been based on Stark. Anyways, there's some fun Drupal history. Garland, I forget the full history behind it, but Garland was in some ways a cool revolutionary theme back in Drupal 6 days, because it had a really cool like translucent header area and these menu items that were fluid and had hover states and things. It's funny how the web changes. Nowadays, that kind of stuff is not, like, nobody cares. And it's all mobile first, so half that stuff doesn't even flow that well in a mobile first world. This is going, it seems like it's not failing, so that's actually not so bad, but I would think it would fail on one of these blocks. We'll see what happens. It says it's complete. So here's my admin password. And if I go to localhost, let's see what I get. If I go over here and log back into that Docker container and run drush migrate status, so ms is migrate status, we'll see if it sees all those migrations. It should. And look, it even picked up, so since I did a migration, it picked up some settings, like it grabbed the site slogan, web developer and photographer. It's also seeing page not found here, which is funny. I'm guessing it's trying to find the view. So in Drupal, let me log in. In Drupal, you can set the front page of your site to any path in the system. And I think I have mine set to, well, let's look it up. Now that I'm logged in, I can go to administration. And then, is it in settings or something? If administration ever loads, I can look. While this is doing that, I'll just go to jeffgeerling.com. It says homepage is, where is it? System site information, I think. Yeah, so the homepage is /home, and home is a view, I think. Maybe. Maybe it's not. I don't know what home is. Maybe home is a page. Let me go to type page apply. Yeah, home is a page with the URL of /home. And so URL path. Yeah, so the URL alias is home and the page title is home. So until that page exists, if I'm on this new site, until the home page exists, which doesn't exist yet because it hasn't been migrated, because it's content on the site, it's going to give me a 404 on the home page because it's trying to find /home, but that page doesn't exist. And it looks like it also sees all these nodes, so that's good. And we can go ahead and try running that migration again. But before I do that, I'm going to export, since I exported the configuration, I'm going to add it to the Git repository because it looks like things are working here. A lot of settings are already coming across, and my site looks, I mean, look at this, it's so close. You have Jeff Geerling and Jeff Geerling. That's, I mean, we're like halfway there at this point. That's a joke. Hopefully somebody laughed, but since I can't hear you, I'm not sure. All right, so those blocks are okay. I'm going to go ahead and commit this. Let me make a note here. I'm going to make a note of what the command is for exporting the content. which was right here. My goodness, I'm getting all mixed up. So I'm going to make a note there, and I'm going to say, I can remove that now. Configuration, anytime configuration is changed or any modules or Drupal is upgraded, you should export the site's configuration using the command that, and then push any changes to the Git repository for deploying. Oh, you can't see some of what I'm typing, can you? A new version before deploying the latest code to the site. Okay, so notice that I'm updating my documentation as I go. I think in the first episode I mentioned like this README file is where I kick off on all my projects. And if I didn't document this here, I would probably spend at least a minute every time that I ever want to work on this again in the future, because I don't work on my jeffgeerling.com website daily, probably not even monthly. And so I would forget these things. You know, it's only muscle memory if you do it a lot. And you know, I do know, I think Drush config export is also Drush CEX. I don't know if you can see that, what I just typed. It might be behind me. But anyway, Drush CEX, I know that from muscle memory of doing this a zillion times, but a lot of other commands like this install command, I'm not going to sit there and type it out all the time. So having it here to copy and paste from my README is really helpful. So I do that a lot with my projects, and I'm doing it here because now, even if you know, there's this thing called the bus factor. If you don't know what it is, factor. The idea is, you know, I run jeffgeerling.com, and you can read about it on any of the links here. Wikipedia is fine too. If I were to get hit by a bus, or as a coworker of mine once said, let's not think about getting hit by a bus. Let's say if you won the lottery and flew off to some other country and weren't heard from again, another developer could pop open this README file and know how to do everything they need to do to get started with this project, to install Drupal, to run the migrations, all that kind of stuff. You know, anybody on this live stream could pop in and grab this and start working on it from here. So that's why I document all this stuff. And for me, I'm very forgetful. So this is helpful to me too. So now we have that command, we have the content, and I'm going to say git status. It should have the entire config directory. So I'm going to say git add -a, and then run git status again to see. So it's going to add all this configuration. Git commit -m fixes number, what was this issue? Number 6, export site configuration into code repository. And then git push it. And since I had that fixes number 6, it's actually going to automatically close this issue once it comes up. So it closed it automatically, and it has the commit that closed the issue, which is a nice feature of GitHub and GitLab and some of these other web-based Git browsers. So that's good. We have our configuration. We have a reproducible website. And I think, not in this episode, but maybe next episode, I'll even set up continuous integration in this Git repository. So every time I do a commit or create a pull request or anything like that, it runs all these tests, like it installs Drupal, make sure everything's working still. Because that's also helpful, especially like I said, if I come back to this in 2 months, I don't want to have to remember everything about the site and what I need to test and all that, just to make a little tweak to something. But sometimes a little tweak can break things. So continuous integration helps prevent that. Okay, so we're there, and we want to run this migration again and see what the error message was. And that might be what we stop at today. So let's see. Let me go back to the README. So we're going to do the migrate-import for the Drupal 7 group, and we'll see where that gets us to. Someone did an LOL. So somebody laughed at that joke I made a couple minutes ago. That's good. That makes me happy. This is funny. Filter null. I don't know why there would be a filter plugin called filter null, but apparently in my Drupal 7 site, something was seen there. I'm going to actually pop this into an issue just so that I can look into it later. It's another one of those things where when you're doing a big migration, you want to keep track of all the little things that you don't fix because it could lead to bigger problems later. So before I get to those other red error messages, I'm going to say, let's see, it's this migration is causing that. Migration causes missing filter plugin filter null. When I run this, I get the message. I'll copy this whole message out. Might be some error with the general Drupal 7 to 8 migrate upgrade path. For now, not a major issue, but look into it later. All right, so sometime in the future I can Google that and see if there's any other people with the same issue and figure that out. But we have a bigger issue. There's lots of red. When there's lots of red, that means it's a big issue. And Joshua says we can automate this with a Docker Compose file. Yes and no. So I can automate some of the things more or less so that I don't have to do all these things all the time. But there are times when I want to install the site but not run a migration, or do some things and not export configuration, or not have the configuration imported, depending on what kind of things I'm testing. Or if I'm just doing theme development, I don't want to spend 10 minutes waiting for everything to migrate over. Or in other cases, like if I'm sharing this project with 5 different developers and 2 of them are just doing theming work, for security reasons, we might not even want them if they're in an external agency. We don't want them to have access to the old data for the website. So they wouldn't have database access. They couldn't do the migration. So I generally like to have the Docker Compose stuff only set up the environment, not to like build everything. And if you use like Drupal VM or DDEV or one of those tools, you can have it do more stuff when you set up your environment, but sometimes it's not desirable to have it do everything at the same time, especially when there's, like I said, teams that are dispersed and different people have different roles that they might not have access to all the same stuff that you do. You can also have a sanitized database that you ship with the code base for the migration, but sometimes that doesn't work out so well, especially if you have gigabytes of database. Luckily, my jeffgeerling.com is like 100 megabytes, so it's not that big. So let's see what we got here. Attempt to create field project type with no type. That's weird. So it's trying to create fields without a type. I don't know why there would be no type here. I wonder if that's another missing module. I'm going to go ahead and search this issue on Drupal.org because that sounds to me like maybe the minimal install profile doesn't include that module. Let's see, migrate, and then paste that error message. But I'm going to delete this field because other people might not have that same field. No mapping. Let's see, field storage. I don't know which one of these it would be. So that's for a particular type of field. This is an interesting one. I wonder, oh, here, field discovery failed for Drupal core version 7. This is weird. I'm going to create a new issue for this since it's 11 o'clock and I actually have another thing to run to. I'm going to create a new issue for this, getting when migrating full message. So I'm going to pop this into a new issue on my repo. And we'll look into this next week. I'm guessing that this is something that I'm missing a module or something along those lines. Maybe missing a field-related module. We'll look into it next week. Okay, so got that. It looks like, so this week we got to the point where we have all of our configuration for the site stored in the code base. We have all the migration configuration set up, and it started migrating some things like settings like the site slogan. I'd never entered this into the site. The migration did this for me, so that's good. And the home page is set to /home, but obviously that page doesn't exist yet because we haven't migrated the pages. So looks like that's all done, and it looks like there's one question here. People say developing a site on D7 is faster. We could go into a whole hour-long discussion on that. It depends on what you're talking about and what you're doing. There are some things that can be faster on Drupal 7, and there's a lot of things that are faster on Drupal 8, and there's a lot of things that are easier on Drupal 7, a lot of things that are easier on Drupal 8. When I talk about Drupal 7 and 8 and compare the two, there's a lot of times where it's like Drupal 8 is different. It's not worse or better sometimes, but it is different. In some cases, I think it's a lot better. Like the configuration management stuff is 1,000 times better than what we had in Drupal 7. Being able to replicate things in Drupal 8 is 1,000 times easier. Moving content around between sites, or if you have like a staging and live site, you can move content between the two so much easier in Drupal 8. But anyway, just in general, the question of developing on D7 is faster. One of the few cases where that is true is like if you're using Docker for Mac and there's like 10,000 files in Drupal 8, PHP files that it has to load on a fresh page load. In Drupal 7, there were only like 2,000. So in that case, general page loads can be faster. But anyway, I've gone a couple minutes over. I think we're to a good point here where we have the migrations running, and we're just hitting some errors probably related to modules that are not installed on the Drupal 8 site. If not, we can probably figure out what's going on using the power of Google next week. And again, if you want to make sure that you don't miss these episodes, please right below me, right here, there's a subscribe button. There should be, yeah, I'm looking on the iPad. It should be right below me, and on the desktop and probably mobile devices. It might be different depending on what you're looking at. Hit that subscribe button. And if you're not like me and like to be notified and get lots of messages on your mobile device, hit that little bell, the notification bell. That'll also send you a little notification when I start these live streams. And I'll be back next Tuesday at 10 a.m. Central or 4 p.m. UTC. And I'll see you then. Thank you very much.